welcome back, and in this segment we will be talking about art and music in ancient Egypt. We'll be knowing about art, when did art start in ancient Egypt, and the most important artistic styles and genres. And joining us right now in the studio to shed more light on that topic is the Egyptologist Mr. Samir Abbas. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Samir, can you tell us more about how did the ancient Egyptians love music and what kind of instruments and the most, of course, important things they used to play music?
So answering your question about music in ancient Egypt, so one of the most important musical instruments that was sistrum, and sistrum that was related to the goddess Hathor, the goddess of music, and she has a famous temple in Dandara. And that was the important thing about music in ancient Egypt. It was used in rituals, in temple rituals, not only in daily uses, but also in temple rituals. And I think that music is started as early as the ancient Egyptian civilization, not only 5,000 years ago, but could be as early as 10,000 years ago, from the prehistory. Music can start simply by having a rock, hitting another rock, which is creating a rhythm, or holding two sticks of wood and hitting them together, which is making a rhythm. That's considered like a very primitive tools of music. Even clapping the hands, that was considered music back in the time until today as well. So music in ancient Egypt is a very interesting topic, especially that I feel proud when I go to the Egyptian Museum in the daily used instruments in ancient Egypt. There is a gallery. Unfortunately, hardly you can see anybody around there, but in this gallery you can see all of the instruments which is the ancient Egyptian used in their daily life. And there is a good section, a big portion of this gallery is for musical instruments, including drums, harps, guitar-like instruments, flutes, clappers, cisterns, which makes me feeling proud when I look at any band today. It's mostly based on ancient Egyptian musical instruments, has been developed, refashions, redesigns, but the foundation of that was laid in ancient Egypt.
Yes, indeed, as you've mentioned, and even in the pre-dynastic section we can see the type of ancient castanets and the ivory hand clappers. But before we continue talking about music, earlier you told me that you'd like to shed light on the beginning and the start of art in general, since music is a genre of the art. So would you tell us about that?
So the beauty of the subject of art, that's under the art we can include various topics as well, including music, including architecture, including paintings, carvings, sculpture, and that was not only a way of the ancient Egyptian enjoying their life, painting or decorating their houses, but also is to approach the afterlife. The afterlife for the ancient Egyptians used to be, it was much more important than their life. They spent most of their life preparing for the death and transactions to the afterlife. I will give you an example. When we look at the pyramids of Giza, so the Great Pyramid, so a project like 30 years has been spent to build his resurrection machine to the afterlife, which is his tomb. But have we found any of the palaces of King Khufu? No, and it's difficult to be found because they spent less time and less effort and less money in building their houses and their palaces. Roughly speaking, if we are talking about spending like $1,000 like pounds or $1,000 for building a house in ancient Egypt, with no exaggeration, would be $1 million will be spent in building and decorating their tombs. So the art related to the afterlife is one of the very important branches of the ancient Egyptian art. I have some illustrations. We might go to illustration number.
So you'd like us to show picture number 7, illustration number 7.
Picture number 7, please.
Number 7, yes. It will take them a while, but they'll get it.
That's related to the music as well. And this illustration comes from ancient Egyptian tomb in the west bank of Luxor. As far as I remember, from Sin Najm tomb. And showing Sin Najm tomb is in Deir al-Medina, which is a very unique site in the West Bank. It's the ancient workman village. And Sin Najm himself,
here it is, it's on screen right now.
He was a chief of an artist. He was a chief of an artist. And the illustration there, which is showing how much he enjoyed art and music in his life. And he was hoping to have the same feeling, the same band, the same musicians, the harp in the afterlife as well. the importance of scenes like that is helps us to understand how their daily life looks like, especially when it comes to art and music. Another scene as well, or another picture, which is picture number 9. If we
Picture
can.
number 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
That come from a tomb as
Yes.
well, and that help us to understand the role of art in understanding about daily life in ancient Egypt. And
Yes, here it is.
And
Yes.
I'm afraid to say, yeah, that's be numbers 8 actually, you know. But we can talk about this illustration
let's talk
instead.
about the one on screen.
This one, here we are. Here is illustration number 9.
Yes.
So number 9, which is showing an Egyptian family enjoying a day trip in the marsh, in the lakes and the swamps next to in the Nile Valley, next to the Nile River. The man, he's holding a pomeranic, hunting birds, and the pomeranic was a very handy tool for hunting birds. Instead of killing the birds, stunning them so they can keep them alive until they go back from their trip, so they can enjoy the fresh meat then. And you can see, and from a picture like that, you can understand about how the ancient Egyptian people enjoyed their time. You will not be able to understand many things about the ancient Egyptians without art and without scenes like that. Talking about art, there is different schools. There is also in the scene or the picture number 17.
Picture number 17.
Yes, that's another very important use of the art in ancient Egypt. And art in ancient Egypt is not only for showing daily life, is not only for entertainments, but also was for propaganda, for media. That was a very important use of the art in ancient Egypt.
Mr. Samir, I want to ask you something. Maybe we did not, of course, study about the ancient Egyptian, but when I go and visit a temple, the drawings on the temple shows that one of the most important instruments the pharaohs liked is the harp. What's the significance of this instrument for them, and why most of the drawings include this harp?
First of all, it seems that the ancient Egyptians, they were very happy of inventing such kind of instruments, and the beauty of the harp is it is light to carry, it's not easy to use, which is giving the ancient Egyptian advantage over other civilizations in that time, which is they will use the drum. That was the most common, like talking about the Nubian civilization in the south or other civilizations. So the harp is more sophisticated instruments, and thus giving a proud for the ancient Egyptians to use such instrument. The flutes as well was one of the very common instruments, and the sistrum as well, which is associated with goddess in ancient Egypt.
Actually, it's quite interesting, really, Dina, what you've mentioned, because actually when we talk about musical instruments, we'd find that the oldest were what we would call the percussion, like the castanets, if you recall, the hand clappers, the ivory hand clappers, and then the sistrum. The sistrum was even more sacred than the harp. Would you tell us more about the sistrum as the musical instrument of the goddess
illustration or a
power?
picture I brought for the sistrum, which is picture number 10.
Picture number 10 for the sistrum.
Of the sistrum. And that's showing how the sistrum looks like, and that's like an instrument making rhythm by shaking the hand. Exactly. And in picture number 16 is the lady which is mastered the sistrums. Her name is Hathor, and she was considered a goddess of ancient Egypt, and she's a goddess of music, by the way. You know, in ancient Egyptians, she was one of the most important goddesses for music, and she has her famous temple in Dondara. And the sistrums, there was a priestess for this goddess, and the way of approaching her, the way of amusing her, the way of waking her up in the morning, that was like an alarm, like for her, is using the sistrum in the morning. And I think that was applied for the daily life of the pharaohs as well. They might, but his servants wake him up using the system too.
Because I believe that it was considered that the music, the sound of it, creates the harmony of the universe, that we even found it in King Tutankhamun's tomb. Isn't it true?
So in talking about the symbolism of art in general in ancient Egypt, and I think that there is a very important use of the art. Yes, if we can go to illustration or picture number 4, please. So
yes.
In art in ancient Egypt in general, it has a sacred meaning. It has a magical meaning as well. You know, talking about sculpture and carving. In illustration number 4, we have a very common scene you'll find in every temple: the king giving offerings to the god. In ancient Egyptian religion, there is no connection between human and gods except with the king. The king, he will be the intermediate who introduce humans to the gods. And the king, he is the one who is responsible of giving offerings, and offerings was needed to the god so they can bring the spirits of the gods back to their own temples or their own houses, and that should be done like 2 or 3 times a day. So the point is, we have thousands of temples in ancient Egypt. How come the king, one king, able to give a service in thousands of temples every day 2 or 3 times? And that's why the carvings or the scenes on the walls playing a great magical scene. You know, like what we have here is the king is giving offerings to Horus. So they believe in these carvings, they are magical, and that will come alive. And when it will come alive, it will help serving. It will be as if the king himself inside the temple, in his magical form, will serve the god. And that's why when people change their religion in ancient Egypt, from ancient Egyptian religion and gods into Christianity, and they had to use the same temples because it had a strategic locations, it's very well built.
It's sacred.
It's sacred, exactly. So they tend to chisel out the figures, not because of the hateness against the religion, but because of the belief that these magical figures can produce spirits, can harm them. And the same belief actually introduced into Christianity. When you look at the icons in Christianity, the icons in the Orthodox Church is a holy object, has a spirit. They believe in these icons has a spirit and holy objects.
Mr. Samir, of course, there are lots of secrets about the pharaohs and the ancient Egyptian civilization. Until this moment, we don't know about yet. But for example, we know that Queen Nefertiti is one of the beauties of the queens at that time. What about the singers? Do we know that? Is there any famous singer, any famous kind of music and song during the funerals or during the weddings or during certain occasions? Do you have any information about this?
Actually, that's a very important and very important question. Famous names for famous singers, so far there is not many known from the ancient Egyptian civilization. But answering your question about that, we can read the hieroglyphics now, and we know the sound of the hieroglyphics, so we can speak the language of the ancient Egyptian people with the sounds, and that's only because it was preserved through the Coptic language. But music, how we know about what the type of music played in ancient Egypt? This is still a very controversial subject, and there is some Western scholar, Western musicians, they came with ancient Egyptian. They said that the ancient Egyptian music piece. I listened to it, and I felt very upset because I don't think that had any connections with the ancient Egyptian music. I think that the best way to know how the ancient Egyptian and the rhythm of the ancient Egyptian music, when you listen to religious chanting in churches and in South Egypt, the way religious chantings has been made, and even using some of the musical instruments, systems still used in the churches until today, I think that would be sounds very much the same. Especially that when, if you are not paying great attention, for what is played, you don't know if that was Christian or Muslim chantings. I'm talking about like ancient, Upper Egypt tradition. When you see a custom in ancient Egypt, which is the Muslims and Christians doing alike and like each other, without thinking that does come from ancient Egypt, because that is a connection between that influence both Christians and Muslims in Egypt. So what you're talking about is a very important subject. It could be a big project for predicting and studying and trying to come with songs played in ancient Egypt and trying to figure out what was the exact composing and rhythm of these songs, so we can create album, and this album will sell very well, and we can promote and we can make plays. Yes.
But returning back to Dina's question about the enchantresses, actually we do have some records, but about the priestesses who worked as enchantresses in temples for the gods, and that was one of the major titles for especially the female priests working for goddesses especially. So would you tell us more about that?
I assume that Dina, she was asking about names, like
names.
For example, like Kalsoom today, so we have...
No, but because these were servants and slaves, most of them in the courts of the noblemen, they didn't give them, like, usually it's entertainment banquet scenes, so I don't think
But
that
there
you
are
find any-
favorites, of course, for the queen
Yeah.
or the
And
king.
there is also another
But some of them had titles, Dina. Some of them had, like, the titles, some of the noble women had the titles Enchantress of the goddess Hathor, Enchantress of this goddess or that goddess.
titles, but hardly any names has been mentioned. And but there is also a big gap we have, which is from where we get our information about art and music in ancient Egypt, mainly from tombs and temples, right? Because nothing of the ancient Egyptian houses has been well preserved. Rarely, because the houses has been built in the Nile Valley using mud bricks, which is a very weak material.
Won't the
will
title
disintegrate
of
to the root.
Enchantress of a god or goddess be a sort of a form of singing, in a sense, a religious singing practice?
Yeah, but I think that, that the gap of information we have is, so first of all, so the tombs we have is dedicated, as I mentioned, to the afterlife.
Yes.
Houses has been built out of mud bricks. Even the king palaces built out of mud bricks, which can easily disintegrate to mud again. It wasn't built to survive. And that's why we have a very unique site, which is still not well excavated, the site of Tal al-Amarna. And this site, that was an ancient Egyptian capital, well preserved, has been completely leveled, but just digging for in the foundations, the palaces which is found there is some mosaics, not mosaics, paintings, floor paintings has been found. One of the big one displayed in the Egyptian Museum, and some wall paintings in display in the Egyptian Museum as well, which is giving us about the daily life art and the art which is used in their houses back in that time.
Okay, Mr. Samir, I wanted to ask an important question, and I almost
It could be about Akhenaten?
No, you said that you studied the language of the
ancient
pharaohs, and you know how it sounds. So can you mention a sentence with their language and with the sounds of the words?
So I will mention a few words, and I will put that in a sentence together. For example, Midun means the prey or the talks of the god. Okay.
Yes.
Another word, Di Ankhijet, may he given life and stability. Di Ankhijet was, may he given life, stability, and power. Ramis itself is like a sentence, the born of the sun god. It derived into Ramesses. The beauty of the language is most of the names of the ancient Egyptian kings, it can be easily translated. Wisr Matra, Setib in Ra. That is a sentence. Wisr Matra, Setib in Ra is the powerful justice of the sun god who was chosen by the sun god. That is the coronation name of Ramesses II.
Did you know some words like sit, stand, tired, for example?
Definitely. We have. So that was a complete language. That was the oldest used language.
So you have the information of the whole language. You know the language as a whole, every words and everything about them. You know that.
And about the ancient Egyptian language?
Yeah?
No, we don't know that. I'm not talking about myself. Myself, I studied ancient Egyptian language. I said that for 5 years, but I cannot say that I can read it all. You know why? Because, for example, that if you consider that your English is your mother tongue, and you are fluent in English today, you have been born in English, like as an English native speaking, and you're speaking English fluently. So when you handle a book, when you start reading a book in Shakespeare writings, can you read it without struggling?
No, there are certain words.
So which is mean that the ancient Egyptian, because that was only like 300, 400 years before, and there is a difference in the way of the same language has been written, even within 200 years. What do you think about a language that was in use and has been written for more than 5,000 years? So what do you think that the different stages of this writing, and that's why the ancient Egyptian language scholars, so they have different specialists. Those who are specialized in the Old Kingdom, in the early part of the Old Kingdom, in the late part of the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, late period. And add to the complications is it is not we have like a different episode about language, and
different scripts.
Exactly. Add to that, it is actually symbols, and these symbols is like a 1,000 symbol evolved into 10,000 symbols in the late period. When you go to Edfu temple or Komombo temple, there is symbols which has been used in these temples, which is even confusing. I think that the ancient Egyptian priests, which is they used to be familiar with the language back in that time. So reading the ancient Egyptian and add that to another complications as well. Every language is associated with a culture. For example, And there is no way to make a literal translation. If I'll tell you that I would like to walk in your own shoes, it doesn't mean literally that I take your shoes off, I will put your shoes and walk. It means that I would like to put it in your place. So think about the ancient Egyptian language as the oldest language practice and the longest language practice in the history of mankind, and think about the metaphors in that, and think about an Western scholar trying to understand that by literal translations and putting that together. I think that the Egyptians today, they are the best scholars, if they study the ancient Egyptian language well, to make a proper translation. Because that's how we will not make a common mistake. There is a very strong debate about Ramesses II, for example. He married two of his daughters. When a father would like to honor his daughter, what he will say? Set Abuha, the lady of her father. So we have still the same
and maybe concept. She's his favorite.
Exactly. It doesn't mean, but it was interpreted by Western scholars as if he married two of his daughters. And there's a very strong debate about that.
Well, there is a bit of a debate about that because I'm with the other school that he might have married since they married their sisters. But as you've mentioned, it's debatable.
Marrying sisters, that was, I completely agree with you. There was lots of intermarriage in ancient Egypt within the family, brothers and sisters and brothers and half-sisters to keep the royal blood intact.
Unfortunately, the time of this segment is up, but I'd like to tell you something to assure you, Gina. They do have vocabulary like dictionaries for ancient Egyptian language, which and because it's signs, the sign is written with what we call the determinative and the meaning. So don't worry, if you really need to check a word, there is a dictionary.
I'll ask you.
And we can check with Mr. Samir the name of the dictionary later on. And by this we come to the end of this episode of, not the episode, excuse me, of this segment of Breakfast Show. I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Samir.
And hopefully we can make another segment.
We need to talk more, of course.
Thank you, sir.
For finishing this subject.
Thank you. And we'll be out for a quick break, and we'll be back again on Breakfast Show to continue the episode with a new segment. Thank you very much, and continue staying with us.